Idaho Matters is brought to you in part by St. Luke's Pharmacy, now offering free home delivery. For daily medications or one time prescriptions, home delivery is easy to set up. It's convenient and safe. St. Luke's Pharmacy, now delivering to your doorstep. Information on how to get started at stlukesonline.org.
Family, work, school, you've got a lot going on. I'm Aisha Roscoe from NPR. We know you're busy, so we've made staying informed easy. The Boise State Public Radio mobile app is a hassle-free way to keep up with the latest news and stories. Whether you're cooking dinner, folding laundry, or just tackling your daily to-do list, staying in the know has never been so simple. Download the free Boise State Public Radio app today, so even when you're busy, you'll never miss a beat. And join me for Weekend Edition every Sunday morning from 6 to 10 on Boise State Public Radio News.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Samantha Wright, filling in for Gemma Gaudette. You're listening to Idaho Matters. A man has been cured of HIV, but that cure may be very hard to find. Do you have bad knees? Well, a new study says it may be because you eat too much fast food and soda. And GLP-1 drugs are a great way to lose weight, but for up to 15% of people, they don't work. So should you still keep taking them anyway? It's Wednesday and time for our Doctor Roundtable with Dr. David Pate, former CEO of St. Luke's Health System and the co-author of the excellent book, Preparing for the Next Global Outbreak. Dr. Pate, hello, good afternoon.
Hi, Samantha.
And if you have a public health question, you can send us an email. It's idahomatters@boisestate.edu. Okay, so a quick update. Last week, the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare said Idahoans may have been on a plane with someone with measles and that they traveled through the Boise airport. So how dangerous is it to be in a plane with a measles patient?
That's not good. If you are, uh, if you are not vaccinated, if you are someone who did not you're old enough but didn't have measles, if you are a child that is not vaccinated, particularly a child under the age of 2 who's not vaccinated, and pregnant moms, and there's a whole list. And so the reason this is not good is that measles is the most contagious virus that infects humans that we know of. And so, and I would point out, uh, it's not just the people who were on the plane with the infected person. It's those that were in the terminal at the same time, those that work TSA that this person was in contact with, those who are employees of the airport, those who sat at the same gate or terminal, those that maybe got on the plane after that patient had disembarked, because the virus can persist on surfaces and in the air for up to 2 hours. So it puts all, their medical freedom takes away freedom for a whole lot of people who are at risk for measles.
Wow. Okay. Health officials have been tracking down anyone who may have been exposed, but what should you do if you get a call and they say, "Hey, you were on one of these flights, or you were in the same terminal"? What should you do at that point? What can you do?
Well, the good news is that if you are fully vaccinated, there's a 97% chance that you won't even get infected.
Hmm.
And there's almost 100% chance that you're not going to get very ill from measles and not develop some of the really frightening complications of measles. What the concern is if you or someone in your family that you are traveling with is not vaccinated or not protected for some other reason, then you have Basically, if someone with measles is in close proximity to you and you are um, susceptible because you're not vaccinated, most likely, 90% of those people will be infected. That's how contagious the virus is. So
Whoa.
you've got a 1 in 10 chance of escaping getting infected. And so the fortunate part of all this news is that the incubation period for measles is quite long. It's basically 10 days to 2 weeks. That means that if you, and hopefully these people were contacted right away, you have time to go get vaccinated and it
Hmm,
will protect you.
hmm.
So, but you've got really you need to go as soon as you can, but you probably got a week, maybe 10 days to thwart this. But I would go just if I got the phone call and my baby wasn't old enough to be vaccinated, or my wife was pregnant. I mean, I would be on the phone to my doctor today and getting intervention.
Wow. Okay. Oh, scary. Okay, a man in Oslo with HIV has apparently been cured of the infection thanks to a stem cell transplant from his brother. Can you tell us about what happened in this case?
Yes, this is a man who, although he was having a lot of bad luck, he was infected with the HIV virus
Mhm.
and he had developed a blood cancer.
Ugh.
Um, and so, what they did is oftentimes with certain blood cancers, at least, we will embark on a stem cell transplant if there is an immediate family member who is close enough in match. Turns out, now that's only about a 25% chance that a brother or immediate family member would be a close match. It turned out his brother was a great match. So, what they did is they did the stem cell transplant to treat his blood malignancy, but lo and behold, his HIV infection went away. And so, what they did on further investigation is the brother not only was a great match, he was one of 1% of people of Northern European descent who have a gene that actually removes the protein, the receptor protein that the HIV virus binds to from the immune cells. And so what happened was the HIV virus could no longer infect his brother's cells because he now had all these immune cells in the blood replaced by his brother's transplant, and his brother carried that gene even though the brother with the HIV didn't have that gene. So that way the gene was able to protect him, and it caused the HIV virus to no longer be able to replicate in his body, and then they could just follow it over time and see that all the markers of HIV infection were going away.
Well, this is really rare because I think I read only 10 people have been cured of the disease, and I think because there's a pill that people can take now to stop the symptoms of HIV, that a lot of people may not realize there's no real cure for HIV and AIDS, right?
Yeah. So this, so when I was practicing medicine, when HIV infections first came out, but we didn't know what they were, it was very scary. People got extremely ill, lost tremendous weight, and essentially everyone died.
Mm.
Um, so it was a death sentence. Then, with these medications that you're mentioning that can slow down the replication of the virus, um, we have now been able to transform a 100% lethal disease in people to a chronic disease for most people. In other words, we can't get rid of the HIV infection, but we can keep the levels of the virus that is replicating down to very, very low levels so that it is not adversely impacting their health. As you said, we now have about 10 people that have been cured. And what's notable about that is, even though, as you and I just discussed, this particular situation is a fluke and it's not something that is going to be generalizably transferable to greater populations. On the other hand, it is now giving us what it does is it gives us evidence, if we can do something to block that protein receptor or prevent it from being expressed, and we now have way more sophisticated technologies, unfortunately, a lot of them that our Idaho legislature seems bent on preventing to be available to Idahoans. But we have a lot of growth in our understanding here. And I have no doubt that within a few decades, we very well could be at a point where we can talk about curing people that have HIV infection. It just depends on if we are willing to make the investments in this line of research. And of course, we've really set medical research back a lot in this last 2 years. So we'll have to see, it's very encouraging.
Okay, Dr. Pate, a new study says if you have bad knees, it may be because you eat too much junk food. That sounds really weird to me, Dr. Pate. How did we get from knee osteoarthritis to junk food?
Well, it's interesting, Samantha, and you may recall over the past 6 years how often you and I, or Jim and I, have talked about the role of inflammation in our bodies, and particularly to people that get more severe infections or people that get underlying neurodegenerative diseases, etc. Well, that may be the common theme in this case as well. So, what has happened is we have known for a long time that developing obesity is going to make you at greater risk for osteoarthritis, particularly in your knees. And not terribly difficult to understand. Those knees are supporting more weight. That weight can cause them to grind, and there you get arthritis. But we have noted that what used to be particularly a disease of people in their 60s and later in life is happening earlier and earlier. And so, obviously, we do have an epidemic of obesity occurring in our country and across the world where younger people are developing obesity. So, that certainly could be an explanation. But what happened was, in imaging some of these folks, what they noticed is that when they looked at the muscle structure on MRI in the thighs above your knees, what they saw is, in a lot of these individuals, marbling like you might find desirable in picking out a steak at the store. And you and I always have to talk about gross things and eating.
Yep.
So here you go. But what they have noticed is that this fat can get in between muscle fibers or even within muscle cells. And what it appears to do is increase the inflammation. And what they noticed is that when they took the dietary histories, the people who had the most of that fat in between their muscle cells were those that had higher ultra processed food in their diets. And what it appears that the fat does is it actually interferes with growing muscle in response to exercise and in regenerating muscle in response to muscle injury. And what happens is with people with osteoarthritis of the knees, because it's very painful, they cut back on their activity. And therefore, it's a vicious cycle where they're exercising less, so the muscle weakens, but they often put on weight. And then, of course, as you know, Samantha, in our crazy, frantic world today, um, you've got more often both parents working. And frankly, after all the stress of work, who wants to come home and cook a healthy meal? And so we're picking up, junk food at drive-throughs on the way home. We are not making healthier decisions because, frankly, it might take more involved time in preparing, and so all of this kind of circles around to fuel the fire, if you will.
Well, and I thought it was fascinating this might, and they're careful to say might, that the junk food might be causing the marbling and the problems within the muscles, which then are the problem because they can't support the knees. So I'm going to throw a couple of figures out. More than half of all new cases of knee osteoarthritis are being diagnosed in people under 55 years old. So that's not just an old person's disease anymore. And I think you alluded to that. And then there was another one. I think this was from the CNN article, and we'll link back to these on our website, boisestatepublicradio.org. The CNN article said more than 50% of all the calories consumed by adults in the United States come from ultra processed foods. That's a little scary to me. Is it scary to you too?
Very, because we have now been repeatedly showing that high ultra processed food diet does tend to increase inflammation in the body. We have ways of measuring that, and thus it's not just your knees. We have been following inflammatory markers in people, for example, that get heart attacks. And when those inflammation markers remain elevated, they're more likely to have a second one. Same thing for strokes. And then we were already talking about neurodegenerative conditions. And that's why we think getting vaccines in older life may protect you or delay the onset of Alzheimer's and other dementias because we can decrease inflammation. Um, and so, at a time when we should be the most health enlightened, because we have all this evidence, what we really have is we have more ultra processed food options and less expensive ones. And we have people shying away from vaccines because of misinformation and disinformation. So, all of these bad combinations, it likely means until we come to our senses that we will see these diseases that we previously saw in 60 and 70 years old in 40 and 50 years old. In fact, there's some pretty good evidence. We are starting to see that with respect to heart attacks already.
Okay, so just focusing on the knee study, we know eating better is better for you in general, but do we know if eating better can reverse this muscle damage that they saw in the study, or is it too soon to know if we suddenly start eating all our veggies that we're going to get better?
Too soon, but there is some suggestion that, in fact, yes, it will get better. I think that with conditions like this, may be a mistake to focus on only one thing. So I think what we at this point have at least enough evidence to be saying, look, here's what we believe will help prolong the functioning of your knees. Eat healthier, eat whole foods. So ultra processed foods, here's how I think of it, and all the dietitians and nutritionists listening in are going to fall out of their chairs. So I apologize to you, but here's a simple way that I think about it. The more the food doesn't look like what it started as, you're probably dealing with ultra processed foods. The more it looks like how God made it or how it came out of the ground, you're dealing with whole foods and healthier foods. So, if you can change your diet to where you're spending more time in the grocery store in the fresh produce, in the fresh veggies, the fresh fruit, whole grains, those kind of things, then that's going to help you. The other thing, obviously, is we have to try to get the pain under control so that we can get people walking again. But before we do that, there are things you can do. There are low impact exercises that will strengthen those thigh muscles, which help support your knee joints. So, leg lifts and elliptical bikes and things like that. There are things that we can do that won't put further stress on your knee, but can help. And then getting your weight down. That is going to pay off.
Well, and to your point, it's not just chips and fried food and going through the drive-through that's bad for you, but I think this came up in one of the articles too. They said don't just grab a protein bar because you think it has protein and it has vitamins, and so that's a good alternative. That's not usually a good alternative, right? Protein bars aren't all they're cracked up to be, depending on the bar.
Yes. So the problem is they producers and distributors of food do try to do everything they can to attract you to their food to think that it is healthier than it actually is. So when I was running St. Luke's, one of the things that I'm very proud that our pediatricians did is create a program where they took parents to the grocery store and just showed them how to look at the labels and identify those foods that are trying to make you think they're really healthy, but frankly are just really excessive sugar and not the things that you think you're getting. So very important to read labels. There are some healthy protein bars out there for sure, and other protein supplements, but you do have to be careful. And for many years, I was a vegan. I can tell you, you think you're getting something vegan that is going to be healthy for you, and then you look at the ingredients, and they have just it is meat free and dairy free, but they've substituted by adding a ton of sugars and making it high calories. So you have to be very careful.
Okay, Dr. Pate, let's talk about GLP-1 drugs. These are like Ozempic and Wegovy. And this is important because as of last fall, 12% of adults in America were taking these drugs. 12%. So we know the drugs help with diabetes and weight loss. And now a new study says for some people, the drugs don't make you lose weight, but they may still be helping you. Dr. Pate, make this make sense.
As always. Well, I do think it gets back to what we were talking about in the last segment, and that is that even if you're not losing weight, and this is what they showed in the knee arthritis study too, that if you can get the inflammation under control,
Mhm.
it improved the knee arthritis symptoms. And what that seems to be the same thing here. And we've had indication of this for a long time. I've just looked at the data as it has trickled in with amazement because we looked at this as a weight loss drug. But as you have mentioned, not everybody loses weight with it. But when they have studied people that are on these, even if they didn't lose weight, we saw a decreased risk of having a second heart attack after the first. We saw a decreased risk of stroke after having a stroke. We saw that people with congestive heart failure had better outcomes. They stayed in better control. And we some recent studies particularly looked at some of the benefits of to your liver where fat gets in your liver, much like what we were talking about, fat getting into your muscles.
Well, and like you said, there's a lot of things in here. May slow your risk of strokes, heart attacks, decrease inflammation, may help your liver. Is it just inflammation? Is something else going on? Or are we still trying to figure that out?
Well, I think we are still trying to figure it out, but I think we've got some pretty good clues. So, what it looks like is that there are cells of some of our organs, particularly like, for example, the liver or even our immune system, that have these receptors that the GLP-1s work on. And what it appears is that the GLP-1 drug, when it binds these receptors, particularly in the immune system, that level of inflammation goes down. It tells those immune cells, relax. And you may remember from our early days of COVID talking about children who would get COVID, but then within 2 or 3 months become deathly ill. And we have now convincing evidence that what happened in those children is the COVID infection sets off this huge inflammatory process that then culminates into where they come into the hospital, and we can clearly see that it is inflammation gone way overboard. And so I think we're learning a lot more about this and the role of inflammation in so many aspects of our health. Inflammation increases in people that are overweight, inflammation increases in people with higher body fat levels. And it can cause metabolic disturbances of our blood pressure, our cholesterol, our triglycerides, our blood sugar. And so people with diabetes typically have very high levels of inflammation. And that may be one of the reasons why they were a group that we saw initially had some of the most benefit from these GLP-1 drugs. So I think inflammation is the common underlying theme.
Well, all of this is important because another article that came out recently said many states are cutting Medicaid coverage for GLP-1 drugs because they're expensive. One figure said in 2023 in the US, people spent more than $71 billion on the drugs. So a lot of states are cutting off Medicaid coverage for GLP-1, and a lot of them cut it off in January. So a lot of people this year who may have been able to get them can't anymore, right?
Well, that's correct. And I think that, look, when you see, let's just take another example so that I can make my point. Um, let's say that, Samantha, you have some things wrong with your house. Maybe there was a prior leak, and I don't want to replace the roof because it's so expensive. And then maybe there was some problems with the electrical wiring. Well, it's working fine right now, and I don't want to spend the money to repair it. Those are all logical thoughts at first until you consider, well, wait, what's going to happen if I don't repair that roof? Now you've got some water damage to you have some mold damage, so much more expensive. What happens if you don't fix that electrical wiring? Well, you've gone from where your electrical system's working fine to now your house is on fire. So I think this is the same kind of analogy. The easy thing to do is to say, oh, wait, it's so expensive, we're just not going to cover it. Well, but ask yourself the question, if we don't cover it, are we just making everything else more expensive in this population? Because what we have seen with the GLP-1s is you decrease the risk of heart attacks, you decrease the risk of strokes, you decrease the risk of diabetes, you decrease the risk for joint replacements, all kinds of things. So, are we being penny wise and pound foolish? I think that's a possibility. But what I would do is say, hey, we need to study this, because if you look at where's most of the Medicaid spending going, and just healthcare spending in general in this country, a lot of it goes to chronic disease. And so, if we could, I think if the Maha movement, which so many of us were in favor of, yes, let's make America healthy again. But these are the things we should focus on, not taking away vaccines and things that we know work. Let's focus on things like this. How, what is the long term effect? Let's do the studies and see, are we being penny wise and pound foolish?
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, you've worn those hats, the doctor hat and the administrator hat. And it's sometimes there's, do you have the money now versus will you have the money later? And that's, when you're talking about a house, that's one thing, but you're talking about people's health. That's a big deal.
Well, it really is, and I have been in those kind of situations. And you're right; those are very difficult because it's so appealing to say, "Let's go for the immediate win." But I do think that without a long-term focus, we're going to do things that make perfect sense for this year, that are really going to be decisions we regret in the long term. Now, what I would also say is that the government has not begun to use their leverage in these situations. Americans are paying far more for these drugs than people in other countries. There is leverage to be applied here. There is the potential to play these companies off of each other, saying, look, we want to offer a GLP-1 to our Medicaid program, but we're only going to pick one, and we want to see who will give us the best deal. Or we ought to look at some of the overall problems with our federal drug pricing. We are letting drug companies, take way more advantage of us than I think needs to happen, and even states. And I think there are many things we can do. So I wouldn't just throw my hands up in the air and say, well, we can't afford it, um, until you actually look at, well, what are our options? How could we make this more affordable? And then do the studies to determine, is it a sound investment or not?
Okay, so do you have Bixonymania? This is if you maybe have sore, itchy eyes. You rub your eyes a lot, your eyelids might turn a little pink. Maybe you went online and got worried. Oh, what is going on? Maybe I have something. And AI said, oh, well, you've got Bixonymania. Dr. Pate, let's talk about this particular medical condition because it doesn't exist. Can you tell me a little bit about this particular story that came out?
Yeah. So, first of all, you never want to catch a disease that you can't pronounce. It's always bad. That's a rule you can hang your hat on. Um, Now, what these researchers did, this was actually research. And what they did is they fabricated a research article out of whole cloth. And this isn't the first time this has happened. We have actually had organized science disinformation groups doing very similar things, and getting those articles out to try to support their arguments. Um, what happened is these researchers uploaded two fake studies that they made out of whole cloth, about this new disease, to a preprint server back in 2024. And they wanted to see what would LLMs, which are large language models, this is how AI looks at all the data out there in the universe and then decides what it thinks about it. And so they wanted to see, could these AI programs figure out that this was fake. And they did a lot to try to help the machine learning identify that these were completely fabricated. They fabricated the author's name. They even fabricated the author. They fabricated the name of the university that the author was from. That university doesn't even exist. They fabricated the name of the city where the university was. And in the text of the article, they put in the description embedded in it that this entire paper is made up, and they discussed the participants in the study, and they said we made up 50 participants, and so it's trying to tell them this. And then on the acknowledgments, they put in the acknowledgement section of the paper that they wanted to thank a researcher that was from the Starfleet Academy, for all you Star Trek fans or whatever that comes from, and that who were aboard the USS Enterprise.
Surprise. Yeah.
So those might have been clues. And then the funding source was identified as an organization that it explained in the acknowledgement does research on advanced trickery. And so they thought for sure these models would identify this was a complete farce. Unfortunately, most of them got fooled. Most of them now would give people response. Oh, yes, you have a terrible case of mixonomania, which doesn't exist, as you said.
Well, and you mentioned the funding initiative in the paper. It said it was from the University of the Fellowship of the Ring and the Galactic Triad, and that even the name of the fake disease, because it has mania in it, that any doctor would know that's a made up condition, because that's not an eye condition. That's a psychiatric term. So okay,
Exactly.
they made up Bixonymania. I can't even say it. And they sent it out, and AI said, it's real. And people went online and said, I have itchy eyes and I have red eyes. What do I have? And they said, you have Bixonymania. I don't even know where to go with this. So the researchers who came up with the fake disease were trying to find out if AI would pick this up, right? If they would actually decide that this was a real thing.
Correct.
So, all right, well, they figured out that AI wasn't smart enough to decide that was fake. Got it. Now there's a lot of stories out there saying it's not a real disease, you don't have it, you're okay. However, is there some kind of medical ethic thing we should be worried about? Because they did put out something that AI did pick up. I mean, is that something that help me out here? I don't even know if this is a good thing. Is this a bad thing? Is this a scary thing?
Well, that's a good question. And now this was research conducted in Sweden. So
Mm-hmm.
they have different systems than we have here.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what, in the United States, if you're going to do research, you have to have a research oversight body who examines both the ethical issues as well as the study to make sure people aren't harmed. I'm not sure that would pass muster in the United States, but we learned a lot from it, and we learned how vulnerable we are to this. And of course, people like myself that have been following medical disinformation for the past 6 years could tell you absolutely this is a big threat. People that are involved in selling supplements and selling cures and all kinds of things for these diseases are the ones that themselves are publishing some made up nonsensical things, or taking a study and completely misrepresenting what it is. So it's a problem. We're going to have to figure out as a society, how are we going to address this? Now, first of all, this is a call for enhanced editorial boards so that these things don't get published, don't get out into the public domain before they're looked at, because any good editor would have realized this is a complete joke.
Yeah.
But it fooled AI, and we probably should look at, well, what should be the rules around AI? And of course, our government hadn't really come up with much on rules about AI yet, but we need to address this because it's a real and present danger.
And in the about minute and a half I have left, I will say that they found in the study about the fake disease that the AI picked it up, but then it was cited, this fake study was cited in some peer-reviewed literature. Some researchers may be relying on AI-generated references, according to the researcher, without actually reading the paper to see all the red flags that were in there. That's scary too, right?
Absolutely, and those people, I blame those researchers, not AI. If you're publishing a paper or writing a book, you should be aware of what any reference you're going to put in your book or in your paper, what it actually says. This is where we trip up the anti-vax organizations all the time, because they just think if we put a whole lot of citations, then nobody will notice that it doesn't say what we say it does. Well, people like me, there's a lot of others that are looking at this stuff, and we check the references because that's the first place you can usually out these false research studies about. But we need editorial boards to say, look, you have to check the references to make sure they say what the author is suggesting. And authors, if you're going to use references that don't say what you say, then we are going to take some kind of action against you that's going to make it enough of an incentive that they double check their references. You get into a court and submit a brief with made up sources, you're going to be in trouble. So we need the same thing in scientific research.
Yep, and they're seeing that now in some court cases. It's really scary. Dr. Pate, thank you for taking us through the quagmire of the health news this week.
My pleasure.
We've been speaking with Dr. David Pate, former CEO of St. Luke's Health System and the co-author of the book Preparing for the Next Global Outbreak. If you have a public health question for our Doctor Roundtable, send us an email at idahomatters@boisestate.edu.
And that'll do it for this episode of Idaho Matters. Make sure you check out our podcast feed because you can find more episodes of topics that might be interesting to you. And for more local news and headlines, make sure you subscribe to the Connector podcast. Know someone who might enjoy our podcast? Be sure to share it with them today.
If you like podcasts like this, explore more from the Boise State Public Radio podcast family. There you'll find a mix of daily news, Idaho Voices, and in-depth series on a wide range of topics. I'm talking wild horses, political scandals, sustainable ranching, and militia groups in a post-January 6th world. Wherever you get your podcasts, just search Boise State Public Radio to find what Idaho's NPR station has in store for you.